And welcome back to Just-ok-wargaming. Raymond here, having a look again at Oathmark Battle of the Lost Age, and this is going to be the first of 3 videos looking specifically at the expansion books. Today we're going to be looking at the Battlesworn book. So it's just worth quickly noting that the expansion books are exactly that. They're an expansion. You can't play Oathmark with just the expansion book. You will need the beautiful, amazing core book to play it, and the expansions will add on a whole bit more. So we'll go through the book page by page and look at what is included in it, what extra you get, and what is useful for just a few games and what is useful for every game of Oathmark you play. And then we'll cap up with just a quick little review of what I think of the book overall, and maybe how it could potentially be adjusted for the second edition coming out in August. So this is Battlesworn. This is the first of 3 expansions that they brought out for Oathmark, and it has a focus on river or lake battles. So if we look in the contents, we'll see that it first talks about battle honours, which is something which is universal for all game of Oathmarks that you can include, and I think it's quite simple and a nice little addition to the game. You then also have engineers, which can be used in all your games, and they are an excellent new unit. And then you have rivercraft, which will obviously be only useful for games where you're playing with a river, which for a lot of people may be pretty rare. The thing which I really like about these expansions are these military expeditions. So they're like very short campaigns. And I think this is the funnest way to play Oathmark, is playing a series of linked scenarios, which can be done in a relatively short amount of time. If you meet up every week or 2 with your gaming buddies, you could get through a military expedition in a month or 2 quite easily. So it's not a massive commitment, which I really like. Then we have a short bit at the back, which just adds in the new spells, the unique territories, which is what you win by playing the campaigns, new creatures, and your spellcasting abilities. You have your quick little introduction. Just quickly note that the beautiful artwork that we see throughout Oathmark Battle of the Lost Age rulebook is continued in the expansions, and it is a real pleasure just going through the book and looking at all the art and photos. Battle Honours is the universal thing which you can get from this expansion, useful in all game of Oathmarks. Essentially, in a nutshell, you play games of Oathmark, you have a unit at the end of a battle, which you thought did something pretty awesome, and it has to follow some basic rules. Had to have survived the battle. It's got to have been of a unit that was more than 5 or 10 figures, depending on its base size, and a few other bits and pieces. But if it did something cool, it took out an enemy unit, it got you some victory points, or I think you could really just say anything you thought that was awesome in your game, you can give it a battle honor. Now, what does a battle honor do? It simply gives you 1 reroll of a dice. So it could be a combat dice, it could be a activation roll, it could be a morale roll, but you get to reroll 1 dice in the game. It doesn't sound like much if you're coming from like Warhammer, where rerolls seem to just happen for every single dice that you get. In Oathmark, there are pretty much no rerolls ever, so having access to 1 is really, really strong ability. When you do get a battle honours, it does increase the cost of your unit, and you can award battle honours to a unit several times, I think up to 3 times, so you can get several battle honours. Obviously, for Oathmark, it's all narrative focus, so when you record that it has a battle honour, you also want to record the name of the battle that they won that in, and you could even flesh it out and write down the honourable deed that they did to accrue such a battle honour. It's a very simple rule. In the book, it probably goes on a little bit too much for it. There's about 10 or 12 pages on it about spending at battle honours, regaining battle honours after a battle. They get their reroll each game. And then there's a source section here on if your unit gets destroyed, and potentially they could be destroyed and lose the battle honours completely, or they might lose a couple of games. that is Battle Honors. At the end, they just have this additional special rule, which is nothing really to do with Battle Honors, but it's just about playing with a Oathmark in your game. So some sort of like unique statue or banner that your army has as their Oathmark, and a little morale bonus that it could potentially grant you. So let's look at the next piece. Let's look at Engineers and Rivercraft. So Engineers are a universal one. Again, like Battle Honors, you could add them to all your games of Oathmark. I think they're really fun. The Engineers can do, you get them for each faction. So your dwarves, humans, elves, orcs and goblins. And I'm pretty sure in the Undead expansion, they probably have some Engineers in there. In game, they can be used to make cover, essentially. So you get like a little, wooden palisade or something, which they could assemble, and then your troops can use that as a defendable obstacle. They can also be used to take down enemy fortifications. And if you're ever playing that scenario, in the main book, there's a scenario where you need to cross a river. It's very hard for the attackers to do that. Having Engineers will make that a bit easier because they can make a temporary bridge for you to get across. That's about all that Engineers can do really for you in a game of Oathmark. I think there is room for expansion for this, where there could be siege rules put in place. And I know that the Ashenstone channel has some siege rules which he uses in his game of Oathmark, and they seem really interesting. I could see Engineers could have a much larger part to play in that. And there's all your different races for the Engineers in there. Now, the Rivercraft is quite simple. You can have a small craft, which can hold 1 unit, or you can have a big rivercraft, which can hold 2 units, and they're used on water. So in this case, you're looking at rivers that go down your battlefield, or it could be like a super large lake. And there's rules in here for moving the boats, river velocity, shooting from boats, having your combats on the boat, and embarking and disembarking onto the beaches. And that is fine for whenever you're going to be playing with a full river down the middle of your battle. I think that that's a pretty unique situation. And maybe that this part could have just been a separate PDF document or something like that. And so they could have had something which could be maybe have been used a bit more universally in your games. Saying that, it is useful in the context of what comes next in the expansion, which are these military expeditions. So let's have a look at them, because they are what I think is the coolest part of these expansions. So the military expeditions are the short campaigns I was talking about. They vary in size from 2 scenarios up to 4 scenarios. I think there's scope that in the future they could have some bigger military expeditions where they could have ones ranging from 5 all the way up to 10 scenarios. Could be a great way to really expand upon them. All the scenarios in this book are unique. They have good narrative in them. They've got special rules, and they all use rivers or a big lake. So then you have 10 scenarios to play through, using the rules within this book for your rivercrafts. So I think that is really nice, that even though the rivercrafts is a very unique niche rule, they do give you a whole bunch to play through, and I think it is well worth having those river rules, because you're going to be given 10 games of Oathmark to play through. The first military expedition, the Abandoned Temple Complex, heaps of fun, real narrative. You've got, this abandoned dock to start with, which you have to go and capture, and then the enemy will do a night. Whoever loses the scenario does a night attack that night to try to destroy the dock so they can't get down the river towards the temple complex. And every scenario, like I said, has special rules and has outcomes where it discusses what the victor of the scenario will get. They either get something extra for the next scenario, or they might get a bonus for the very last scenario of the campaign. The one gripe I have with the scenarios is that there's no maps. which is a bit of a shame. I think they could make space for the maps by maybe getting rid of the unique catastrophic events table, because I think that would come up pretty rarely in games. Because when you look at some of the setups, they can be quite confusing. I had to read the setup for scenario 1, the broken docks, about 4 times before I think I had an understanding of what it would actually look like on paper. So maybe that's just me, but I think maps just showing you the layout, because so many of us are probably more visual people rather than trying to read it off word for word. You also have some military expeditions of much shorter duration. So if you're just starting out, all for a flower, there's only 2 scenarios. Yeah, you're having one which is just essentially all on water, and then the very next one is you've landed on an island and you're trying to secure the island. This part here is really interesting. It's got the amphibious assault. So he talks about doing a D-Day type landing. There was a Warhammer series of scenarios in a campaign called the Albion campaign. It was heaps of fun back when I was young, and that had this exact scenario. So you had 3 cannons and 10 dwarven warriors defending a beach against a giant swarm of goblins or skaven or something. These asymmetrical scenarios I think are really fun. Joseph says that he mentions that it's really hard to balance and therefore hasn't put it in. I think that's a bit of a shame. I'd really like to see in the future some really asymmetric scenarios. I know they're hard to balance, but I think they can be really great for new players who are being taught by a really experienced player, because I could, for example, get my wife to play with me, and she could be the defenders who might have a bit of an easier time, and I could be the attackers where it's much harder for them. And we could both play as hard as we want to play, and that will balance the scenario out. So it takes into account the player's skill as well. And it can be good to have a challenge from time to time. So several other military expeditions. They've got the Great Falls, and then there's further expeditions in other books. I think they're fantastic. I really like them. Lots of interesting ways to play games of Oathmark. So let's have a little overview of the whole thing, and we'll review. So overall, of the 3 expansion books, I think that this one is the weakest, only because the rules within it for the rivercraft are not universal rules that can be used for every game of Oathmark. And I think the battle honors, though, are nice to add a tiny bit of flavor. I think it's pretty simple, and it could have been, put down to a 1-page piece, just saying that at the end of the battle, they did something awesome, can get a reroll. Saying that, is it worth the 30, I think it was 30 Australian dollars that I paid for it? Absolutely. I got a lot of use out of it. I played all 10 scenarios, and they were really, really fun. And we still use the battle honor system to add, flavor to our unique units, along with the other 2 expansions and what they add on to it. Things I like to see in the future, like I already mentioned, I think it would be great to have maps for each of the scenarios. I would like to see some longer military expeditions, 5 to 10 scenarios would be great. And, the expansions are probably a good opportunity to start adding in those, extra smaller races. So I know that they've done the undead, but I would love to see a Ratman race, potentially like an ogre or halfling race as well. So let me know your thoughts, and write a comment if you've used Battlesworn. How did you go with it? Did you like the military expeditions? And until next time, keep on playing. I'll see you later.